What's the word?
Okay, that's quite a description. Okay.
So,
Okay.
are you not going to tell me what the word is?
Um,
No,
I have to
no, you
think.
don't have to.
I have to give
You
it a
don't
thought.
have to.
Well,
I
that's
don't want
all.
you to. I don't want you to get locked up. No, 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 no. Sorry. What was the next question?
Welcome back to our channel. This is another video in a series of interviews where we chat with language teaching experts in a fun and informal way. Our today's guest is an accomplished language educator and a teacher trainer who's been running his own academy for many years. Alan, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, you have a rather fascinating background in both law and professional goalkeeping. What got you into teaching?
Well, you know the saying, don't you? You probably know the saying. It's a British saying, I think. You know how the British have this sort of black humour.
Right.
Right. So the saying is, if you can, do, and if you can't, teach. So that got me into teaching because I wasn't able to find a job in 1964. There weren't a lot of jobs going round. And there was a crazy school where nobody wanted to work. It was a boys' secondary school. So nobody was wanting to work there. But because I couldn't get a job otherwise, I had a degree in law, which wasn't very useful because I was offered a job for £1 a month. And I was £1 a week, sorry. And our circumstances were such that £1 a week didn't suffice. So I got a job teaching. They do, and in fact, I was probably the worst teacher ever. Certainly the worst teacher I've seen when I started, because I knew nothing about it. I've been in a grammar school, and I was now in an inner city boys' school, and it was quite a rare experience. They also say that if you can't teach teachers. But fortunately, after a while, they decided that I could teach, and I carried on from there.
What a compelling experience. Thanks for sharing. Now, many English learners find the language quite challenging. Do you think that perhaps some teaching methods might unintentionally make learning the language more difficult than it really is?
Well, I would certainly agree with that. And what's complicated about it? There's nothing complicated about it. You managed to learn it, and I managed to learn it. So, I don't see where the complication arises. I think perhaps, as you're suggesting, some of the ways that it's taught. I don't like teaching languages. I like to help students to acquire languages. So I'm a crashing fan, so I'll admit to that. But I do think that there's a lot we can just look at ordinary language one students, and we can see how they've done it, and I think there's a lot of similarity. The first part should be listening to English, and then when they can, reading English. And yeah, I don't think there's complications in it.
Now, oftentimes some English learners are presented with conflicting approaches. On one hand, there are those who flood them with complex grammar rules, hardly ever use vocabulary. But then there's the other side of the coin, where there are those who make them unrealistic promises of reaching fluency in just 6 months. What's your take on that?
Are you suggesting that some people suggest that?
Well, there's a whole lot of people suggesting that, at least
Well,
for.
then I think at the risk of being considered perhaps a bit on the rude side, that's bullshit. But no, let's first of all, they've got to be motivated, haven't they, to do it, or they've got to need to do it, or want to do it. To give you some examples, I've got a friend who was, he's my age, and he did French at school. He was
Right.
absolutely pathetic at French. They were, of course, using the system that they always had, the grammar thing, and giving them questions that they didn't. Nobody spoke in French in the classes, and I learned German. And nobody spoke in German in the classes. So they just give you a load of sheets, and you've got exercises to do, and look at all the grammar and all. That obviously blatantly wasn't the way. And a lot of the perhaps there's certainly some methods that are more effective than others, certainly.
Right.
But I think you've got to try to simplify things a bit, and by that. I explained that I was coming to. I explained that I was coming to Spain. This was after I've been teaching. This was in 1988, and
Right.
I've been teaching. I've been teaching since 1964. So I've done a fair bit of teaching. And I was in a school. It was a special school, and these were not well. Slower learners they have problems. These kids have problems, a variety of problems. But we also had, for example, there was a Pakistani child who he was in my class. We only had 12 kids in the class, and he was in my class. And I thought, this is a bright kid, this here. I wonder what he's doing here. Anyway, to cut the story short, there was a lady who came in twice a week, and she was teaching him English, So the consensus in the staff room was that she was pretty brilliant. She was very good at teaching English.
Yeah.
And I thought, she's coming twice a week. This boy came over and he didn't know any English at all, and she's teaching him twice a week. I looked out of the window. He was playing in the yard. Well, he was fairly static because he was surrounded by English kids all talking to him. Yeah.
Right.
Well, pretty obvious where he got his English from. He was listening to the
from his peers.
The teacher was doing next to nothing. She was a good teacher, but she was doing next to nothing. That was the important thing. When you look at other examples, the lad that I'm talking about, my friend, he was completely useless at French, as he would be. And then he got a job when he was 20, and it was in Switzerland. And he started in, and now he's got an incentive. He's got motivation to learn the language. But at first he was in a German-speaking part. As you probably know, they speak German or Italian or French in Switzerland. And he was in a German-speaking part, and he learned German, quite a lot of German, because he was listening all day to German. Listen. And that's a good tip I would give for the first thing. Listen. And then he became pretty good, possibly about B1 standard at German. He was moved to a French-speaking part. He was in that part for a few years, fluent French. He's fluent, absolutely fluent. He met a Spanish girl, and he married the Spanish girl. She didn't learn any English because they always spoke in Spanish. So he's fluent in Spanish. He's fluent in English. Why? Because he was listening and speaking. If you ask that same person, he would possibly know what a verb is and what a noun is. But otherwise, if you were to say to him, could you give me the past participle? He had a clue what you were talking about, but he speaks fluent French and he speaks fluent English. And what I'm trying to say by that that it is about listening. There's not a fantastic difference between learning your first language and the second language. It's about listening, listening. What did we do as kids? As kids, we listen,
No, I
listen,
see.
listen
So
to it.
just
We started to
soaking in
speak.
the
We
soaking.
started to speak, and then when we could, we started to read. But we spoke, 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 and then you couldn't stop them speaking. I've got a 4-year-old grandson, and he's just well, no, about a year ago, really opened the floodgates to speaking. You can't shut him up. And so what we do, we send them to school, and that shuts them up because they're told we're all worried about them speaking, and then as soon as they get to the stage whereby they can't speak and want to speak, we say, shut up and sit down. The point I'm making is that I also asked this girl, this teacher, and I asked her to recommend one book. I said, I haven't got time to read all this stuff about learning second languages, but just recommend one book. I've read quite a bit since, to be fair, but she recommended Krashen, acquisition theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that makes sense. And I've more or less been a complete devotee of Krashen ever since, because it does make sense. And certainly, my idea is that you get them to listen, listen, listen.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, right.
unbelievably, you probably won't believe this, but I'm not bothered about them speaking at the start. I get them to. I want them to listen. They can speak, of course, especially if you've got little kids. They love to sing, etc. And nothing wrong with that. But
Mm-hmm.
to get adults or even the kids and start asking them silly questions like "What's your name? Where do you live?" and all that stuff. I just don't believe that people would do it. So you get them to read. When they're at the stage that they can read, then it's all over. Because once they're reading, you can find, if you can find one, there's certainly a brilliant one on the internet, an intensive reading thing. Starting, it's for first language students
Yeah.
basically, but ESL teachers have cottoned on to the fact and are now beginning to use it, and it's absolutely brilliant. And you can read, this is intensive reading, extensive reading as well, very important, but intensive. You can move up, you can move up, you can move up, and you can go all the way from six reading age, all the way up to university. And
Mm-hmm.
that will improve everything. It obviously improves. It increases your vocabulary. It makes it much easier to speak if you've got a good vocabulary, and it makes it obviously easier to write. It's all over.
That's
All
very,
over.
right. Yeah, I think this illustrates that students shouldn't rely on their lessons only to learn and grow, and also the importance of surrounding themselves with the language, doesn't it?
I think what I tell the students, first of all, the reading thing, that definitely works. There's only one big problem with it. There is a massive problem with it. And that problem is you've got to do it. You've actually
Mm-hmm.
got to do it. Because obviously, if you're doing stuff at home, the kids come here, the students come here, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
2 hours a week. What's 2 hours a week? They do English at school as well. Some of the schools do it well, some don't. But they do 2 hours a week. They've got to do
Mm-hmm.
things on their own. By far, the most important thing is motivating that student to do it. And there are lots of ways of doing that. But
Absolutely.
and included in those lots of ways to do it are your lessons and how vibrant your lessons are, how you motivate the kids or the students or the adults, you know.
Absolutely. And
But
that's
but it has to be explained that they're not going to
mhm.
do it. You're suggesting, I don't know, 6 months, a bit of a course. They're not going to do it like that. Of course, it's a lot of hours. It's quite a lot of hours.
One of the greatest hurdles students have to overcome is the fear of making mistakes. Any insights on how to address that?
I tell them not to worry at all about mistakes. Obviously, you make mistakes. You're going to make loads of mistakes, but you've got to get the sense that it's not a, oh, I've made a mistake.
Okay.
Right, I love them to make mistakes. We can talk about those mistakes. Everything we do in life is about making mistakes. We hopefully learn from our mistakes, but of course, lots of the times we don't. We don't learn from our mistakes. So, I mean, mistakes are brilliant. That's what you want. You want them to make mistakes.
Mhm.
And well, yeah, I mean, if you can do it, you get them to peer review when they're writing. I mean, what's they're writing something? They're writing something for exams. Yeah, they're writing something for exams. I mean, there used to be the silly system whereby you marked it and gave it them back. Well, that doesn't work with most students because they don't even read it. But if you do peer correction of writing, that's a brilliant way of doing it. You have to instill in the students the atmosphere that it doesn't matter if they make any mistakes. I mean,
Absolutely.
this is life, isn't it? This is life. I mean, your mistakes, you learn from them and move on. But don't be frightened of mistakes. And if you've got a class of a lot of people who are frightened of mistakes, you've got to convince them that it's not important to make mistakes. Of course, we make mistakes. I mean, what's this fear of mistakes? Is the way that we do education. But you're supposed to get everything right. Don't get everything right. Get things wrong. That's life. You
Absolutely.
know that. I know that. We go through life, we make mistakes, and hopefully we learn from those mistakes, but frequently we don't.
If a teacher focuses heavily on correcting every mistake students make, could he actually be exacerbating this fear of making mistakes or, in a sense, fostering a culture of perfectionism?
Yes, of course, yeah. They have a saying in Cantabria. I'm in Cantabria, Santander,
Hmm.
and it's a rural area, most of
Right.
it. And they say that we spend too much time, a lot of teachers spend too much time weighing the chicken instead of feeding the chicken, which is
That
a pretty useful saying, I think. We do that. Of course we do that. It's the easy way, isn't it? Teaching. You give them something, give them a test, and then after the test, we can give them 9 out of 10 or 7 out of 10.
okay.
Easy.
Yeah, marking is
You
yeah.
lot are
Marking is easy.
sufficiente. You lot are sufficiente. You lot are so brisaliente. You know, what? I mean, can't we learn? When will we learn? We've got to learn. And you don't do things like that. I mean, weighing the chicken, feed the chicken, but even better, tell the chicken where the food is and let the chicken find its own food.
What
That,
an
that,
interesting thought. That
that's what we should be doing. That's what we should be doing. I'm a great Ken Robinson fan as well. You know, I don't know whether you know of Ken Robinson, but a pretty thought a lot about education and did a lot of those YouTube videos and the what's it videos, the famous ones that I've forgotten the name of them now, but the ones that Ken Robinson and I've forgotten the names of the videos, but he had the idea. He had the idea. He was certainly very good.
Thank you, Alan. That's definitely a golden piece of advice for not
Yeah,
only
no, I
for
mean,
both teachers but also for learners. But now, with someone with such an extensive background in education and teaching, you do know a thing or two about teacher training. Tell us a little bit about your course for teachers.
yeah, well, that course, it's basically for our internal students because there are some things on the course, on the external course, that's the one in ESL Move.
Mhm.
There are some things there are some games that are just for internal students. With the internal students, we can follow exactly what they're doing. It's a bit like the reading lab in that when they make mistakes, they move on to the next one, but then a week later or a couple of weeks later, they go back, they get the one that they've failed on previously. And
All right.
so that was the base of it for our internal students. And the idea for it originally was that YouTube was a total shambles and still is, because if you're
Right.
looking for anything on YouTube, you're all over the place. You can't
Right.
find things, or you find a gush of things, and you don't know what level they are. You have no idea which levels to put them in. So we
All right.
just roughly put them into different levels, the videos, and then added games to make it more interesting. And that's it basically. And it's not for, but it's also, the intention is to provide simple, they call them fillers, simple fillers for teachers to use in class. So a lot of teachers have to go through a course book. They go through the course book, they do a filler, perhaps with a game from ESL MOOC or a couple of games from ESL MOOC. And that's the idea behind it, to provide fillers. When we get to the situation, it's still it's an ongoing process. So when we get to the situation where we feel reasonably comfortable with what's on there, we'll start to do PDFs that teachers can use and we can give to the children to do it at home. So that's basically what it's all about. And once again, it's about listening.
Right. That's
And that's it. That's what it's for. It's to help teachers really, and to help students as well, and hopefully get some of the students to do things at home. We've been pretty pleased with it using here. We've been using it with the little ones because
right.
obviously the little ones can't do the reading lab because they can't so they can't. Uh, if we've got the stage whereby they've got a tablet at home and they can play about with the games, they pick up a lot of vocabulary like
Yeah.
that. It's not a course as such. You just get them to get a lot of vocabulary by listening
All right.
and reading, and that's basically it. It's not a course that we're going to sell to teachers. It's just free stuff on the web.
Is all this material on your website?
Yeah, it's on the ESL MOOC website. We've got a bit of stuff on Bray's website as well.
Okay, I'll put it down the link
Yeah,
so that
we're just
users can.
it's just a family business. So it's myself, my daughter, and my sister, and my wife, and
Okay.
we started an academy in '88, and then my daughter went down to Madrid and got one there about 10 years ago, and yeah, that was the main part of it. But we found that it was very useful, as I think I mentioned. We did PDFs with games on and things, and with videos on. So we found that very useful. So the
It is
son's
absolutely.
idea was to look at the YouTube videos and put them into the groups and add games to them.
Right.
And that's what we've been doing. And yeah, I think it's been pretty successful.
Thank you, Alan. Those resources will definitely come in handy for many teachers. Now, I'd like to challenge my viewers' vocabulary skills by asking you to play a couple of games with us. The first one is what I call the alphabet game. So here's how it works. I'll give you a letter and a category, and then your task is to say a word starting with that letter. You're in? Yeah.
And I've got to make a sentence.
Yeah, you
with
have to.
them.
Yeah, with the letter, just a word starting with that letter. Are you?
Abominable.
For example, the first letter. Yeah, let's start with letter A. Food.
Food. artichoke.
Good. And letter B, and countries.
Country, Bolivia.
And letter C, sports.
Letter C, sport, cricket. Got to be cricket.
Of course. All right. Letter D, hobbies.
Hobbies, darts.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
I don't play darts. I don't know why I said darts, but still, darts, yeah.
Okay. So now let's move on to the next game. Question or translation. Now, if you choose translation, I give you a couple of sentences to translate into Spanish. I know you're quite fluent in Spanish, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
No.
No, I'm not. So I'll have the other one, not the translation.
Okay, so question then.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, for question, it's actually true or false game.
Right,
All right,
true or false.
true or false. In Japan, there's a school where students clean their own classrooms and serve lunch to their classmates. True or false?
Oh, I say that's true. They're brilliant in Japan. They're absolutely brilliant. They do a lot of things like that. That's true.
All right, the answer is
False.
true, correct. Okay, that's correct.
Hey!
Okay, so
Right. You believe it while I'm winning.
okay.
Whilst I'm winning, sorry.
Okay, here's another one. The word school comes from the Greek word skole, which originally meant leisure or spare time. True or false?
Well, I can't imagine that you've just made that as a question. So even though my Greek is zilch, I'll say that that's true.
And the answer is it's false.
Going now. No, I'm not going. That's it. That's it.
Let me tell you what. Let me tell actually, school. Well, what it says here, I didn't actually know the answer there. I didn't. I just came across that and I found it interesting. It says while school might have evolved from a word related to leisure, it likely didn't directly translate to that meaning. So that's false. That's
Right, okay. Oh, you're disappointing me now.
all right. So, one more in this category, for example, the youngest teacher ever was
youngest,
youngest teacher
right?
ever was 9 years old when she taught a college level course. True or false?
Oh, I would imagine that's true. I mean, yeah, that'll be true. What did you teach? Games? No, you get these genii, don't you?
Okay.
Who really, really clever from a very young age.
Well, it could be, but 9-year-old. What could a 9-year-old teach at, to college level?
Oh
Well,
no!
well, other than games, of course.
I saw a video about some boy. What was he doing? Oh, music, and there was a girl playing piano, and she was 5 or something. Oh no, there's some.
Well, there are some gifted,
Oh,
kids
very, very
who, yeah,
bright kids.
probably teach
Very, very,
music.
very bright kids.
Yeah.
Oh, very gifted kids.
Is there too much emphasis on grammar these days?
Well, let's put it this way. There's nothing wrong with grammar. It's great and can be very, very interesting. But they tend to put the cart before the horse, and the grammar isn't it's not the important thing. You want them to understand English and start speaking English, writing English,
Mhm.
and then to improve it, the grammar comes in.
Okay.
And for some people, not for me, but it can be quite an interesting and thrilling thing to do. But no, I mean, if you were in England, nobody. Well, I mentioned my friend. Nobody used to do much in the way of learning grammar.
And that's
But,
quite interesting.
and there is a difference between that and learning English. You know, I
Hmm.
mean, if you, that's how we were given foreign languages, grammar, grammar, grammar. And nobody
Yeah.
could speak the language afterwards. In fact, I don't think the teachers could speak the language. In fact,
Hmm.
I'm sure they couldn't speak the language. If you want me to speak show you I don't know a word of Russian, but I'm
Hmm.
sure I could teach Russian. I would get a book with all the exercises in and grammar exercises, etc., and I would give them, and I'd have another book with all the answers in, or the same book, or the teacher's book with the
All right.
answers in, and I would give them all the questions, and they would do them all, and I would mark it, and I would be a Russian teacher. But no, grammar, nothing wrong with grammar, and
Mhm.
great help when you get to start to write the language. But no, I wouldn't put it as the first thing.
Yeah, it does make sense because if the goal of speaking is communicating, then perhaps there shouldn't be that much emphasis on grammar because as long as it doesn't impede intelligibility. Because when we're talking, we don't actually check on grammar, do we? Yeah, no, as long as we get the message, that's all.
If you enjoy grammar, by all means, but wait until you can speak the language, because by that time you'll know most of it. You know,
Mhm.
so this is what L1 students do in England, and I'm sure
Mhm.
that in most countries, or in a lot of countries, perhaps they don't do it in Spain, but in a lot of countries, you speak you speak the language, you write the language, and and at the end of it, it hasn't been too bad, has it, in England? Because
Yeah.
they've been pretty good at writing books and things, and
Yeah. Tell us about grammar schools. I mean, it's not that you specifically had to attend that school to learn grammar, right?
it works like this. In the in the well, when I was at school, there were grammar schools, there were technical schools, and there were secondary modern schools. What they did at 11 plus, they gave you an examination, gave
Right.
you everybody an examination. They then thought that this determined the intelligence of the people, of the children who take the examination. Absolute
Alright.
stupidity. Absolute stupidity. No, it was
Okay.
stupidity. You
Right.
can't
I see.
believe that anybody would think this. Why do I say it was stupidity? Some children, perhaps we could call them perhaps upper middle class, for want of a better description.
Right.
There were some people in that bracket. There were some children in that bracket. There were some children in what you might call lower working class
Mm.
in another bracket. How they determined the IQ was largely dependent on vocabulary as much as anything else.
Mm.
So in one set of pupils, there was a vocabulary, a fantastically big vocabulary, a
Mhm.
very rich vocabulary. And in another group of children, there was a very limited vocabulary, very limited vocabulary. So they put them in the groups, and they put them in three groups:
Mhm.
grammar school, the ones who got high IQ. No, what they got was a lot of vocabulary, which helped to give the impression that they were super intelligent. At
Ah,
the bottom of
I
the
see.
bottom of the scale were the ones who, the majority by far, who went into the bottom group, the secondary modern. That was
Right.
labeling people from a very early age, so much
Mm.
so that some of the people believed it and still
Mm.
do. They thought that the grammar school boys, I went to grammar school, all right. I went to grammar school, but I went to grammar school because I went to a very good junior school. I was very fortunate. I went to a good junior school. We
Mm.
all
Right.
passed the exam. We all went either to the grammar or to the technical school. Not because I was more brilliant than the other kids, but because I went to that school. A lot of people who failed perhaps came from homes where they didn't receive a rich vocabulary.
What would you say is your golden piece of advice for those who want to make their lessons more fun and engaging?
Um, I don't know, that's a pretty difficult one, to make it more engaging. Well, it's so dependent on what they're doing. I mean, if they're preparing for an examination, you're not going to be laughing and joking all the lesson. Though it depends on what comes up. What's the subject that you're talking about? And I don't know. It's like I couldn't really answer that in a brief thing. Obviously,
Yeah.
you put things in. Well, to give you no.
For example,
So
for
many examples of things that you just get a bit of fun out of it.
is it important for teachers to have a sort of sense of humor in the classroom?
Oh, of course. I think it's good to have a sense of humour outside the classroom as well, because pretty tricky times, aren't they? But yeah, I believe. I think I personally have gone through life laughing at a lot of things, and we always laugh at things that perhaps other nations don't fully appreciate. But yeah, a sense of humour certainly helps. But I wouldn't be put off teaching because I didn't have a great sense of humour, because there's a lot of brilliant teachers who perhaps not quite as witty as the person sitting next to them. But no, I don't. You've got to put a bit of variety in, and you've got to have a bit of variety in the class. And if you're doing something where you are preparing for an examination, I mean, even with that, you can get a bit of humour in it if you're that way inclined, and you can certainly do things that add a bit to the book if you're following a book, or and if you're lucky enough to be teaching the kids, then there's lots of things you can do that define stimulating.
Now, to wrap this up, how about a final piece of advice for those who want to level up their English to improve or reach fluency?
Well, once again, it's completely up to you. If Obviously, if you're in a situation whereby you absolutely need it, then that's your incentive. Otherwise, the incentive's got to come from you. You've got to actually want it, and it's only if you want it that you're going to get it to become fluent. Because it's not easy. Learning a language it's a long thing. There are different ways of doing it, but people use all different ways of doing it. And to say this method's better than that method, etc. At the end of the line, it's up to you. Nine-tenths of the game is about you being, and this is why the teacher's job is to promote that, to get the kids or the adults motivated, to help in that motivation. So you've got to want it, that's all. It's like anything else. If you want to become good at it, then you've got to put the spade work in. You've got to do the hours. Find something that you like doing. It might be like you might like listening to records. There's a lot of stuff you can get out of records. If you like reading, well, you are absolutely quids in, because if you enjoy reading, then it's all open to you. If you read intensively, if you can find one of those websites where you can read intensively and you can judge your level all the time, brilliant. If not, read anything. And obviously, which situation are you in? If you're in a situation whereby you're in the country where they speak it, that's pretty easy. Well, it's not easy because you might be there with other people who speak your language, in which case it's difficult. But if it all depends on the circumstances, but at the end of it, it's up to you.
Alan, I can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise and those insights with us. It's been a treat having you here. Thank you so much. And if you find this video useful, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more.
Brilliant. They do a lot of things like that. That's true.
All right, the answer is
Well,
true, correct. Okay, that's
hey!
correct. Okay, so
Right. You believe it while I'm winning. Going now. No, I'm not going. That's it. That's it.
let me tell you what.